Good morning. Welcome to the best in television entertainment and information, coming to you from WTVR Channel 6.
A lot of history, a lot of heritage, going back to the very beginnings of broadcasting in this country.
It really was a critical turning point for news and media in general.
It has been 75 years since WTVR became a broadcast pioneer.
We were the first television station south of the Mason-Dixon line.
And it was mostly the brainchild of one man who worked tirelessly to put his vision on the small screen.
Wilbur Havens is the guy whose shoulders we all stand on.
A lover of all things mechanical and electronic, Havens first made his name in radio.
WMBG signed on in 1927 as a 10-watt AM radio station operating out of an empty room in his car parts store.
In 1944, his company Havens and Martin filed an application with the Federal Communications Commission for a television station in Richmond, Virginia. While Havens had signed a contract with NBC, there was a coaxial cable shortage. So for the first 3 months WTVR was on the air, no network programming was available. That meant the early stars of television in Richmond were just ordinary Richmonders.
Everything was local. Plays, bands, garage bands. A lady would come on and talk about how to grow African violets. You name it, we were airing it.
Some WTVR employees even worked double duty.
We took one of our camera operators, a guy named Dal Burnett, put him in a cowboy suit with cowboy boots, and he became Cheyenne Dal Burnett at the Half Circle D Ranch. He showed Western movies in the afternoon for kids, and then he had a kids' game show.
All shot in a studio where you had to watch your step.
Cameras that they were using back in the early days were just slightly smaller than a Buick.
So it was a really complex setup, required a lot of cords and cables, adding another danger, another trip hazard to already, kind of precarious equipment.
The birth of Channel 6 also introduced viewers to John Shand, a Navy veteran who for the previous 4 years had worked as a disc jockey and radio reporter. He would be WTVR's first and for a while only news anchor. Years before Walter Cronkite became the most trusted man in America, Shand would establish himself as the most trusted man in Richmond.
Well, if you grew up in Richmond in the 1950s and the 1960s, John Shand's image and voice was just about as ubiquitous as you could get. It was just the man, that's what the news was supposed to sound like.
And he didn't just deliver the news.
The odd thing about back then is they did the news, but they also did commercials.
Product placement was one of the ways that WTVR was making some of its advertising revenues for sure. So you've got John Shand's in 1952 and a photograph from the Valentine collection showing this camera zooming in on him pouring a beer during a Rich Brow live TV commercial.
In addition to local shows, for the first decade, Channel 6 viewers were treated to a wide variety of national programming.
We're one of the few stations in the country that at one time or another have been an official network affiliate for all three of the major networks.
The station became a permanent CBS affiliate in 1960. A few years later, Havens sold WTVR and his 2 radio stations to Roy Park, a North Carolina native turned New Yorker who had made a fortune in the food industry.
It was for millions of dollars, not a bad return on Wilbur's $500 investment to get things started with the radio station.
While a number of changes were on the horizon, one thing would stay the same.
The one thing that everybody that grew up in Richmond loves to see is our old covered wagon logo. One of the stipulations in the contract for Park to take over WTVR is they had to keep the covered wagon logo.
Park Broadcasting owned the station for more than 3 decades. WTVR has had several owners since and is now a member of the E.W. Scripps family. The lessons learned on April 22, 1948, and the days that followed have since traveled long and far from this place.
Many of the standards and practices that are used at television stations all over the world today were started right here in this old building.
And that is a tribute to the visionaries who saw that the future would be televised.
So this is really going to revolutionize the world, and we now know it did.
We were just the right place at the right time, and we're in it at the beginning. I've seen it whipping back and forth during earthquakes. As you know, it's probably the biggest lightning rod in Metro Richmond.
What I can tell you is that the CBS 6 tower has been part of the landscape ever since I can remember.
In the heart of Richmond's museum district, it stands as a monumental work of art.
You look at it today and go, wow.
For the last 7 decades, WTVR's soaring red and white tower has been equal parts awe-inspiring and comforting.
You know, when I wanted to figure out where I was, if I was driving around the western side of the city, it was a place. It was a wayfinding place for me. And I loved that.
When Channel 6 first went on the air in April 1948, becoming the South's first television station, the transmitter was located in a field off Staples Mill Road near Broad Street. But that tower had limited power. So WTVR's visionary founder, Wilbur Havens, came up with a plan to change the city's skyline. And he wanted to lay the foundation right in the station's own backyard.
The tower, when it was built, that's such a story from beginning to end. It took them 3 years just to get all the permits because everybody that could opposed the building of the tower.
While there had been attempts to erect similarly sized structures, no one had ever tried to build something like this in the middle of a city neighborhood.
It was really contentious. It was one of the first times where the city and the citizens are having to wrestle with the balance of the conveniences of modern life with, intrusions into the visual landscape of the city.
Despite some resistance, things began to fall into place in December 1951. Just before Christmas, the U.S. government gave airspace clearance. 1 month later, the Federal Communications Commission granted permission. Then in March 1952, Richmond's Board of Zoning Approvals gave the green light. But there was one last hurdle. WTVR still needed the blessing of the little-known National Production Administration, which was in charge of developing and producing materials and facilities necessary for military defense. So Havens promised that the new tower would be a vital tool for national security. The station had already been airing weekly survival programs produced by the Federal Civil Defense Administration, teaching Virginians about things like air raid warnings and surviving an atomic attack. Havens said a bigger tower would be able to beam programs like that to more television sets than ever before. The NPA signed off on the plan, and construction began at the corner of Tilden Street and Cutshaw Avenue. Remarkable film footage still exists, a silent chronicle of the death-defying exploits of the brave men who built the tower from the ground up and up.
Today there's only a handful of people that can do this, but back then, these were guys from the greatest generation. They had already saved the world, so a little something like building a TV tower over 1,000 feet high was really nothing to them.
The project took about 13 months, a whole lot of steel, and 1.5 million pounds of concrete. And the day it was completed, it went right into the history books.
Obviously, nothing like that had ever been built. It was the tallest freestanding radio TV tower in the United States at the time. 1,049
feet above sea level, to be exact. As predicted, viewership also hit new heights.
You have to remember that tower, when they turned it on, was a flamethrower. That sent out such a signal.
Now, you didn't need to live in the Richmond area to watch Channel 6. In fact, you didn't even need to live in Virginia.
And yes, the signal went up into the D.C. area, well into North Carolina. It burned through the Blue Ridge Mountains into the Harrisonburg area and places like that. It went into Norfolk and that area.
The tower is still a lightning rod, but its flame-throwing days are over.
Knock wood, it's still looking good, even though, again, we really haven't used it since, 2009.
That's when WTVR and every other TV station in the country threw the switch and converted from analog to digital. The tower does continue to broadcast the signal of a local radio station, and it's used by firefighters and rescue crews from all over North America as they train for high-rise emergencies.
It still serves a purpose today, and it helps us find our way to work.
A titanic landmark that continues to stand alone all these years later.
Yeah, and I remember this.
It's been nearly 60 years.
And that's the entrance from the outside, isn't it?
Since Leonard Sandridge.
I just didn't think we'd ever have an opportunity to come back in here.
And Larry Bope.
It was sort of like a dream. It was exciting.
last stepped foot inside this building.
Best part-time job ever.
In September of 1963, both men began working at Channel 6 to help pay their tuition at the University of Richmond.
I mean, this was, for both of us, technology that we'd never seen before.
First, Leonard in the control room.
But I would switch from local to national network and put the 16 millimeter film reels on the machine.
Then Larry in the studio.
Operating the TV camera was so much easier and simpler than what Leonard was doing.
Within a short amount of time, these broadcast beginners became an integral part of the small team that kept the South's first television station up and running.
You know, this was cutting edge. To go back to Crozet in Albemarle County and say, I work at WTVR TV, that was an eye-opener.
If the people watching the show knew two college kids were producing that show, they would probably go, I don't know if they had a remote, but they would have flipped us off.
Though it had been 15 years since WTVR first signed on, this industry was still in its infancy.
It wasn't perfect, but we kept it on the air.
Employees like Leonard and Larry had to learn how to be jacks of all trades.
People were doing multiple tasks. They would do whatever was necessary.
And sometimes that meant those behind the camera would have to get in front of it.
Dow said to me one day, Larry, we've got to fill 3 minutes. Grab a puppet. So I got down behind the set, held the alligator up, and my name was Al the Alligator.
But while most of their recollections of this place are filled with joy and laughter, these men can also recall the time our nation was brought to tears.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
2 months after Leonard and Larry's television journey began, a gunman brought the life of an American president to an end.
And both of us were here during the time following Kennedy's assassination and the coverage that was provided there.
And I would stand in the doorway and just watch all the network monitors, and I felt like it was so intense.
Leonard still has some of the scripts.
All Virginians to attend memorial services Monday in the church of their choice.
And the actual teletype that came in the night Lee Harvey Oswald was shot.
The accused assassin of President Kennedy was shot a few hours ago while being transferred from Dallas City Jail to the county jail.
It didn't matter what your political feelings were. The country became so sober.
And you could sense in the station that it was, everyone knew this was important.
Though they have memories that have lasted a lifetime, Leonard and Larry only stayed at WTVR for about 9 months. Both joined the Army in the summer of 1964 and never had the opportunity to work in television again. But 6 decades later, their feelings haven't changed.
It's like that station's part of your family.
About the greatest part-time job they ever had.
For lots of reasons, it was exciting, it was new, it was real-time stuff.
Just to be a part of television, no, it was great fun.